Welcome to the UFO Enigma, where we explore the mysteries of the cosmos, from extraterrestrial encounters to hidden secrets of the universe. Join us as we dive into stories that challenge our understanding of space and life beyond Earth. The hum of the station echoed through the narrow halls, a low, rhythmic drone that seemed to seep into Stephen's bones. Omega 7 had long been abandoned by those with power and wealth, left to rot at the farthest reaches of the galaxy. The lights flickered above him, casting shadows that danced on the walls like ghosts of forgotten memories. This was where Stephen Riner called home, a cramped, windowless apartment tucked away in the neglected bowels of the station. It was a place where time seemed to stretch and bend, with the oppressive silence enveloping everything. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. The metallic walls, stained with rust and grime, reflected the dim light from a flickering screen in the corner. The holographic display sputtered to life, casting an eerie blue glow that flickered across Stephen's unshaven face. His eyes, bloodshot from sleepless nights, stared blankly at the news broadcast. The words were familiar but distant propaganda, designed to lull the masses into complacency. Reports continue of insurgent activity near the Epsilon Quadrant. The Galactic Council urges citizens to remain vigilant. The message was hollow, a reminder of a world far beyond his reach. Stephen snorted and reached for another bottle, his hand trembling slightly as he pulled it from the grimy cooling unit beside his threadbare couch. The cold metal felt oddly comforting in his grip, a fleeting escape from the crushing reality of his existence. He was 28, yet it felt as though he had lived 100 lifetimes in this small, forgotten room. His life was a never-ending loop: wake up, shrink, watch the news, and repeat. He was a ghost on this forsaken station, his every breath a silent plea for something, anything to break the monotony. He had long since abandoned hope that anything would change. His only solace was the fleeting distraction of mindless entertainment. With a rough voice, he barked, "Computer, channel swap." Something with actual entertainment value. The screen shifted, the bright colors of a reality show flooding the room. Alien contestants with improbably proportioned bodies and exaggerated features, each locked in ridiculous romantic drama, flashed across the screen. It was all fake, absurd, but still, it was a temporary balm for the emptiness. And then, a sound. A sharp, insistent knock at the door. His hand froze mid-reach to his bottle, the silence in his apartment suddenly deafening. Nobody ever knocked on his door. Nobody knew he existed, not that he cared. That was the point. Yet, the knock came again, louder this time, the walls vibrating under the impact. Bang, bang, bang. Something inside Stephen stirred, a strange awareness washing over him. It was as if his mind, long dormant, flickered back to life. His body tensed involuntarily, a deep instinct taking hold. His heartbeat slowed, but it wasn't out of fear, it was more like focus. His muscles coiled, ready for something he couldn't understand. "Who is it?" he called out, his voice rough, deliberately slurred, trying to disguise the sharpness of his sudden awareness. He cleared his throat and added, "You've got the wrong guy." A deep, gruff voice responded, its tone hard and commanding, "Riner, open up. We know you're in there." Stephen instinctively pressed himself against the wall, his back to the door, his breath steady but controlled. His hands tightened around the cold bottle, now feeling more like a weapon than a mere drink. His eyes narrowed, scanning the small apartment for anything that could be used for defense. His heart hammered in his chest, but his movements remained slow and calculated. Something in him felt prepared. "Who is it?" he croaked, trying to sound confused, even as his brain screamed at him to be ready. Your creditors, human. 50,000 credits past due. Mr. K doesn't appreciate tardiness. His words barely left his mouth when the response came, not a word, but the harsh, searing blast of energy. The door lock hissed and melted under the intense heat, a glowing molten hole forming in the metal. The door burst open, and in they came three figures, massive and hulking. Their bodies were grafted with dark exoskeletons, their faces adorned with bioluminescent tattoos that glowed in shifting patterns, marking them as Krull mercenaries. The sight of them sent a jolt of recognition through Steven's mind, though he couldn't place from where. Wrong answer, the leader growled, lifting a neural disruptor, his hand steady and cold. But before Steven could think, his body acted. The beer bottle he had gripped so carelessly was now a weapon. With a fluid motion, he hurled it toward the leader. The glass shattered upon impact, the bottle's shards slicing through the air, and the sharp edge of a broken fragment struck the Krull's throat, right where an implant node was embedded. The leader let out a strangled scream, clutching at his neck, sparks of electricity crackling across his skin. Steven didn't stop. His feet moved as though guided by an invisible force, his body low to the ground. The second Krull mercenary charged at him, and without thinking, Steven launched himself up, driving his fist into the Krull's jaw. The sickening crunch of alien cartilage echoed through the air as the Krull crumpled, collapsing like a rag doll. What the hell am I doing? The thought flickered in his mind, but it was as if he was watching himself, detached from his own body, a silent observer in the chaos. The third Krull was upon him with a vibroblade, the weapon humming with deadly energy. Steven sidestepped, grabbing the Krull's wrist with a grip that was far stronger than any human should possess. Using the Krull's momentum, he slammed him into the nearby wall with a sickening thud. "Who sent you?" Steven demanded, his voice surprisingly commanding, like the words weren't his own. The Krull spat blue blood onto the floor, his voice low and ragged as he muttered, "You know damn well, the debt collector always comes, even for a ghost like you." Steven twisted the Krull's arm, hearing the faint creak of bone, his gaze narrowing. "I don't have any debts," he growled. The Krull sneered, his glowing eyes flaring. "Not what your file says, Commander." The word commander triggered something, a flicker in Steven's mind. Images of a uniform, medals, a ship bridge, but they slipped away too quickly, like sand through his fingers. Before he could grasp it, the first Krull recovered enough to aim his disruptor, and Steven barely ducked in time. A beam of energy grazed his shoulder, sending a pulse of numbness down his arm. He could feel the burn, but there was no time for pain. His body moved on its own again, carrying him through a twisting escape that seemed choreographed. He kicked the second Krull into the path of another blast and bolted through the door, running faster than he'd ever thought himself capable. But where was he running to? As he raced down the grimy corridors of Omega-7, his legs moved with a speed and efficiency that felt practiced, as though his body had memorized the layout of the station, the labyrinth of his prison. The walls around him blurred as he ducked into service tunnels, avoiding cameras with unnatural ease. How did he know where to go? A wave of realization crashed over him, but there was no time to contemplate. Only survival. The cold air of the maintenance tunnel wrapped itself around Steven like an icy shroud, the metallic walls narrowing as he dashed through the labyrinth of pipes and ducts. The faint hum of the station's power grid thrummed beneath his feet, but it was an unnatural silence that hung in the air, a silence pregnant with tension, as though the station itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. His breath came in ragged gasps, his heart still pounding from the confrontation with the Krull mercenaries. Each step seemed to echo in the darkened, claustrophobic passage, reverberating off the rusted metal and leaving him feeling exposed, vulnerable. He couldn't help but wonder how his body was moving with such purpose, as if guided by some invisible hand. He had never known the station like this before, never taken these routes or turned these corners. But now, the path seemed familiar, as though it was etched in his mind, mapped out long ago. The flickering lights above cast shadows that swayed like ghostly figures, creeping along the walls. The corridors twisted and bent, a maze of forgotten service tunnels and abandoned maintenance routes. The air smelled faintly of stale oil and the acidic sting of rust, a reminder of the station's neglect. As Stephen turned a sharp corner, the tunnel widened, revealing a massive, rusted bulkhead that seemed out of place in the station's otherwise utilitarian design. Restricted area. Artifact containment. Read the faded sign above the door in multiple languages, its once bold letters barely legible. The heavy, sealed doors before him were covered in deep scars from years of disuse, yet there was a subtle pulse, a hum, emanating from within. It was as if the area itself was alive, beckoning him forward. Stephen's hand trembled slightly as he approached. He wasn't sure why he felt compelled to enter. His instincts screamed at him to turn around, to keep running. But another, quieter voice within him urged him to push forward. He reached out, and the rusted door slid open with an ominous hiss, revealing a large chamber bathed in an eerie, dim blue light. Inside, the air felt thick, charged with an unnatural energy. The walls of the chamber shimmered as though they were made of liquid metal, shifting and rippling, catching the faint glow of a containment field that hovered in the center of the room. Suspended in midair, glowing faintly with a cold, internal light, was a cube, its surface smooth and polished, with strange, etched symbols that seemed to writhe beneath the surface, as if alive. The cube was unlike anything Stephen had ever seen. It didn't belong here, in this forsaken part of the station. Its presence felt alien, ancient, yet not in the way of forgotten relics. This was something that knew its purpose, something waiting for him. He stepped closer, his pulse quickening as his eyes traced the shifting patterns on the cube's surface. The symbols, they seemed to move when viewed peripherally, slipping in and out of focus, never fully solidifying, as if they were both part of the cube and something more. It was calling to him. As Stephen reached out, his fingertips brushed the surface of the artifact. The world stopped. A violent shock coursed through his body, sharp and intense, as if every nerve in his being had been set alight. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he could feel his very essence fracture, splitting into thousands of pieces, each part overwhelmed with a painful surge of memories. Strange images flooded his mind, faces of people he didn't recognize, places he had never been, whispers of power, and yet, it all felt terrifyingly familiar. He gasped, his body trembling as an excruciating heat pooled in his chest. His skin burned as though the artifact was fusing with him, melding, becoming part of his very being. For a brief moment, he lost control of his body, his limbs twitching, his mouth dry as his mind reeled. But in that moment of searing pain, something deeper, something ancient stirred within him. The cube had bonded with him, its energy sinking into his flesh, crawling beneath his skin like molten metal. He felt it, the memories it unlocked. The ancient knowledge flooding into him, unfamiliar yet intimate. His hands trembled as he gripped the cube, feeling the heavy weight of its power settling in his chest, directly over his heart. He could hear his heartbeat, pounding in his ears, but there was a new rhythm now. A different cadence. A thrum of something more. It was a feeling of immense strength, of having been connected to something far greater than anything he had ever known. Yet, as the rush of memories continued to flood his mind, there was a darker, more sinister undertone to the knowledge. A realization began to gnaw at him, pulling him deeper into the truth of what he had just unlocked. This wasn't just some artifact, it was a key. A key to unlocking something more, something he had been meant to forget. A power far beyond what a mere man should wield. Stephen's breath hitched. The truth slowly coiled around him. The power inside him was not his own. It had always been inside him, waiting. The memories, the ancient abilities that came with the artifact, they were part of him, part of a forgotten identity. He was no longer just Stephen Riner, the forgotten maintenance worker on a decaying station. He was something much more, and whatever that something was, it terrified him. The symbols on the cube began to glow brighter, pulsing with an unnatural frequency, as if responding to his thoughts, to the blood now flowing differently in his veins. He felt the changes, his senses were sharper, his body stronger, yet it was like struggling against a flood of power that he couldn't fully control. There was a deep unease settling within him, knowing that this transformation was irreversible. He staggered back, breathless, as the cube's power reverberated through him. It wasn't just his body that had been altered, it was his very soul that had been intertwined with this artifact, this ancient force that pulsed with untold history and dark purpose. The chamber around him seemed to darken, the walls shifting as though the station itself was reacting to the artifact's activation. The glow from the cube illuminated his face, casting eerie shadows, and for a moment, Stephen wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. He clenched his fists, feeling the surge of energy ripple through him. He was changing and there was no going back. Stephen's eyes fluttered open, his vision swimming as a wave of confusion crashed over him. For a moment, he felt as though he were submerged, floating in a vast, weightless void. The faint hum of the ship's engines pulsed in the background, deep and rhythmic, but it was the unfamiliar scent in the air that drew his attention first, something exotic, floral, and faintly metallic, as though the very air around him was alive with something he couldn't name. The room was vast, far larger than any space he had ever encountered in the cold confines of Omega-7 Station. The walls shimmered with a smooth, liquid-like texture, as though they were formed from some kind of living material, constantly shifting and adapting. The room was bathed in a soft, ethereal light that seemed to emanate from the surfaces themselves. It was beautiful, unnatural in a way that made Stephen's heart race with an uneasy mix of awe and dread. His body ached, muscles sore as though he had been subjected to a force far beyond the limits of human endurance. He tried to sit up, but his head swam with a dizzying whirl of images, alien landscapes, ships of unimaginable size, vast armies marching under his command, and a face that seemed to watch him, both familiar and alien. As he steadied himself, his eyes focused on the figure standing beside the bed, watching him with a piercing gaze. She was tall, her skin a deep shade of blue that shimmered with iridescence, like the surface of a polished gem. Her eyes were large, an unsettling shade of violet, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her long, flowing hair seemed to move as if it were underwater, each strand shifting with its own rhythm. She wore a uniform adorned with insignia he didn't recognize, but the symbols carried an undeniable weight of authority. "You are awake," the woman said, her voice melodic yet commanding, a slight edge of concern tinged with something else, anticipation. Her presence was both calming and unnerving, as though she were both a stranger and someone deeply familiar. Stephen blinked, trying to clear the fog that clung to his mind. "Where am I?" He tried to speak, but his throat felt dry, his words rasping. He glanced around again, trying to make sense of the strange room, but his head refused to cooperate, every attempt to focus only making the dizziness worse. The woman, noticing his discomfort, stepped closer, her movements fluid and graceful, her footsteps making no sound on the metallic floor. You are aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion, she continued, her gaze never leaving him. I am Admiral Anita KX of the 7th Galactic Fleet. You were unconscious for several hours, but we are now safe. The words flagship and Eternal Dominion had no meaning to Stephen, yet they seemed to resonate within him, as though a forgotten chord had been struck deep within his chest. She reached out a hand, her fingers delicate but firm as she lightly touched his shoulder. We've waited for your return, she said, her voice dropping in reverence. You are the last of the ancient lords, Stephen Riner. The galaxy has awaited the return of its true ruler. The words hit him like a slap to the face. His mind reeled. He was, what? The last of the lords? His breath caught in his throat as he tried to process what she was saying. His heart raced. This couldn't be real. There must be some mistake. You're mistaken, Stephen muttered, his voice trembling. I'm just a maintenance worker on Omega 7 station. You've got the wrong person. He struggled to sit up, his mind still foggy, the fragments of his memories slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. Admiral Anita KX regarded him with a mixture of patience and something else, sadness. She stepped back, her expression unreadable, then gestured toward the viewport that dominated the far wall of the chamber. Outside, Stephen could see the stars, thousands of them, distant and cold, their light flickering in the vastness of space. But what caught his attention was the fleet, dozens, perhaps hundreds, of ships arranged in perfect formation, their sleek hulls gleaming like metallic giants in the void. You once commanded these fleets, she continued, her voice low and steady. You were not just any ruler, Stephen. You were the sovereign. The last of your kind. You held the power to reshape the galaxy itself. A sickening wave of disbelief washed over him. His mind felt like it was shattering, pieces of memories vivid and strange flickering at the edges of his consciousness. He saw flashes of an army that obeyed his every command, worlds bent to his will, the power to destroy entire systems with a single word. His heart pounded in his chest, the weight of the realization crashing over him like a tidal wave. He was no ordinary man. He was something far more, someone who had been erased from history, buried deep within his own mind. His hands clenched at his sides, his fingernails digging into his palms as his pulse quickened, anxiety and panic rising in his chest. This can't be true, Stephen whispered, the words catching in his throat. I'm not that. I can't be. Admiral Anita stepped forward again, her gaze softening just slightly. The cleansing wars, she said, her voice tinged with sorrow. The lords, your people, were wiped out. You survived, but your memories were erased, hidden, so that you could be reborn when the time was right. The galaxy needs you, Stephen. You are the only one who can restore the balance. Stephen's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and dread. The weight of her words felt crushing, impossible. Power, memories of unimaginable power, swirled in his mind, too vast to comprehend. What had happened to him? What had been done to him? And why couldn't he remember? But even as the flood of memories began to rise, fragments, flashes, faces of beings he once commanded, the feeling of holding an entire galaxy in his hands, there was something else. A gnawing emptiness, a darkness. He had been powerful, yes, but how had he used that power? What had he done? Was he truly the ruler she claimed him to be, or was he something darker? Anita stood silently, watching him struggle, her gaze unwavering. The memories will return slowly, in time, she said softly, but you are not just a man. You are the last of the ancient lords. Your power is unmatched, Stephen. Stephen closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of the truth. His hands trembled, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, the images of the past began to take shape, more vivid now, clearer but more unsettling. A flash of golden light, ships under his command, worlds burning, countless lives destroyed. Was this really who he was? The realization was suffocating. His past was one of destruction, domination, and power, but what kind of monster had he become? The stars outside the viewport stretched infinitely in all directions, their cold, distant light reflecting off the polished metal walls of the command chamber. Stephen stood at the edge of the massive, transparent window, staring out into the vastness of space. The universe stretched before him, an endless sea of stars, planets, and swirling nebulae, beautiful, but empty, a cold reminder of the power he had once wielded, and the vast emptiness that had followed in its wake. He could feel the weight of the ancient artifact embedded in his chest, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Every beat seemed to echo through his veins, a constant reminder of who he was now, what he was. His hand unconsciously traced the pattern of glowing symbols etched across his skin, a reminder of a life he no longer recognized. The familiar sense of detachment gripped him again, as though the real Stephen Riner was slipping away, replaced by something far more dangerous. Behind him, Admiral Anita KX stood silent, her gaze intense yet respectful, as if waiting for him to make a choice that could reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. The room was still, too still, and the only sound was the soft hum of the ship's engines, blending into the hum in Stephen's mind. It was as if the entire ship was holding its breath, waiting. "The Galactic Council awaits your decision, Sovereign," Anita's voice cut through the silence, steady, calm, but with an undercurrent of anticipation. "They believe you are the one who can restore order to the galaxy, the one who can bring the Lord's Empire back into power. The fleets are yours to command, the galaxy ready to bow to your will." Stephen's heart thudded in his chest as the offer settled into his mind. The temptation was undeniable. He could feel it like a pull, as if the very universe was inviting him to reclaim his place as a god. The Lords had once ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, bending entire systems to their will, their fleets of ships like blades cutting through the cosmos. It was power beyond anything a mere mortal could dream of, a power that could reshape the galaxy, restore the natural order of things, just as Anita had said. Yet, despite the pull of that power, something inside him recoiled. His stomach twisted, the thought of domination bringing only darkness to his mind. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the image of the fleets, the endless battle that awaited him. In his mind's eye, he could see the ships, their gleaming hulls slicing through the blackness of space, like an unstoppable tide. The commanders at his side, awaiting his orders. He could almost hear their voices, their reverence, as they whispered his name, bowing before him. "What kind of ruler do I want to be?" The question was soft, almost to himself, but it hung heavy in the air. His mind slipped into the past flashbacks of his former self. He could see himself as the leader of the Lords, standing on the bridge of a massive warship, commanding the galaxy with a ruthless hand. His soldiers, his followers, feared him, but also respected him. He had the power to end wars with a word, to shape destinies with a single gesture. His eyes, cold and sharp, reflected only the certainty that he was right, that his rule was the only way. But there were moments, fleeting, rare, when his power softened. When his gaze would fall on the faces of those who served him. There was a flash of compassion, an echo of something human that had slipped through the cracks. It was so rare that it barely seemed real, like a memory buried deep beneath layers of necessity, but it was there. Those moments of clarity, when he had seen the suffering his rule caused, and for an instant, he had wondered if there was another way, if there was a way to protect the galaxy without crushing it under his heel. But those moments were always fleeting, overshadowed by the call for more power, more control. Destruction had come naturally to him. It had been easy. And now, he stood at the precipice, staring into the vastness of space, where the weight of his past and the call of his future clashed like two galaxies colliding. "You must decide," Anita's voice interrupted, more insistent now. "The galaxy is fractured. Without your leadership, it will fall into chaos. The rebels will spread, the systems will rise against one another. Only the return of the Lords can restore balance." Her words echoed in his mind, and Stephen felt the weight of the decision crashing over him. He could feel the power thrumming inside him, a godly force that called to be unleashed. He could feel the weight of the fleets, the legacy of the Lords, heavy in his hands. He could reclaim it all. The galaxy could be his to control, his to reshape as he saw fit. But at what cost? What was he willing to sacrifice? His fingers twitched, almost involuntarily, as memories continued to flood his mind. The cleansing wars, the destruction, the devastation he had caused, the countless lives lost. Worlds burned in the wake of his orders. Children screamed in the streets of cities he had reduced to ash. His eyes darkened as he remembered the faces of those who had fallen, not as enemies, but as innocent victims of his ambition. The power inside him, it had been shackled. It had been hidden away for so long. But now, it was awakening. The lines between who he had been and who he had become were starting to blur, merging into something unfamiliar, something stranger. He was not just the man he had once been, but something else, something more, something that could either destroy the galaxy or save it. What kind of ruler do I want to be? The question haunted him. Was he to be the monster of his past, the tyrant who ruled with fear and destruction? Or was he to be something different, something human? Something that could lead without crushing everything beneath him? Anita's voice broke through his thoughts once again. "You are the last of the Lords. The galaxy needs you to restore the old order. You must accept your place as sovereign." Stephen's gaze shifted from the stars to the ship's glowing walls. His hand reached up, instinctively brushing over the cube that pulsed beneath his skin. He could feel its weight, its call, but the decision was his alone. The galaxy would be his to command, to rebuild, or to destroy. The choice was his. And the weight of that decision, of the power he had once held and now struggled to accept, was a burden that only he could bear. Setting, Haven, a secret rebel stronghold hidden within a hollowed-out asteroid. The air inside Haven felt different, thicker, more alive, as though the very walls of the asteroid were breathing with the pulse of the resistance. The corridor stretched out before Stephen, winding like the veins of some great beast, its surfaces rough and scarred, a stark contrast to the sleek, sterile design of the Imperial ships he once commanded. The walls here were not smooth, not perfect, but real, built with hands that had worked in secret, hiding from the vast empire that ruled over them. The faint, metallic scent of refined minerals lingered in the air, mingling with something more primal, a smell of earth or growth, something organic, like life thriving where it had been hidden from the oppressive gaze of the galaxy. As Stephen moved through the corridors, his eyes flicked from side to side, absorbing everything. The walls were jagged, a network of crude stone and metal that twisted through the asteroid's core, lit by flickering lamps powered by makeshift energy sources. Despite its rough construction, the space had a peculiar sense of life, a vibrant energy that flowed through it, emanating from the beings that inhabited it. The halls were alive with activity. A mixture of species moved in and out of rooms, some working, others speaking in hushed tones, their voices low but carrying a certain defiance in their pitch. It wasn't the hurried, fearful bustle of an underground hideout. No. This place felt like a home, a thriving, united force that had somehow survived and thrived in the shadow of the Empire's iron grip. Stephen's gaze was drawn to the faces around him, alien faces, with features and colors he had never seen before. Scaled skin, tentacle-like appendages, and fur-covered forms, each unique, yet each carrying the same expression of quiet determination and resolve. It was a community, built from the fragments of the galaxy's oppressed races, uniting against the tyranny that had once crushed them all. And standing at the heart of this rebellion was a woman, Marcia. She was unlike anyone Stephen had ever encountered. Her skin was a deep violet, smooth and shimmering as though it reflected light from an unseen source. Her emerald eyes were bright, sharp with intelligence, but also filled with a sorrow that spoke of countless battles fought and lost. Her gaze, intense and focused, fixed on Stephen the moment she entered the room, her presence commanding, yet soft. There was power in her silence, an energy that thrummed beneath the calm exterior, the mark of a leader who had seen the worst the galaxy could offer. Marcia's voice was low and steady as she spoke, but there was a conviction in it that made Stephen take notice. "Welcome to Haven, Stephen Riner." Her words carried a warmth that surprised him, despite the alienness of her presence. "This is where we've built a future, away from the Empire's tyranny. Here, the free peoples of the galaxy can thrive. Here, we fight for a better life." Stephen couldn't help but stare at her for a moment, his mind racing as he took in her words, her appearance, the surroundings. It was all so vastly different from what he had known. For the first time since his awakening, he felt something shift deep within him, a connection, perhaps to the place, or to her, or to something larger than himself. "I never thought I'd be here," Stephen muttered, half to himself, still taking in the chaos around him. "I thought this place would be another prison." Marcia's gaze softened slightly as she stepped closer, the small space between them pulsing with unspoken understanding. "The Empire is the true prison," she said quietly, her voice unwavering. "And it's not just a prison of stone and metal. It's a prison of the mind. The Empire has conquered the galaxy, not just through force, but through fear. They've made us believe we were less than we are. But here, we've broken those chains. Here, we're rebuilding something real, something free." Her words, calm and resolute, struck a chord in Stephen's chest, though he didn't fully understand why. He could feel the pull of what she was saying, but there was something else, something darker that still clouded his thoughts. As if sensing his inner turmoil, Marcia gave a small nod. "There's someone you need to meet. Commander Kane. He's the leader of our rebellion. He's the one who's seen the Empire's truth for what it truly is." They moved deeper into Haven, through a winding passageway until they reached a large, open chamber at the heart of the asteroid. At the center stood Commander Kane, a figure whose presence commanded the room. His broad shoulders were draped in dark, rugged armor, adorned with symbols Stephen didn't recognize, but the worn edges of the armor spoke of years of battle. His skin, a deep gray, was weathered by time and hardship, and his eyes, dark, almost black, shone with a fire that reminded Stephen of the same fire he had seen in the eyes of the soldiers who once followed him. But there was something else there, a fury, a righteous anger that had been honed by years of conflict. Kane's voice was deep and gravelly as he spoke, his gaze cutting straight to Stephen. "So, the Sovereign finally awakens." His words were laced with sarcasm, but there was no mocking tone, only a recognition of the weight of the man standing before him. "The last of the lords, they say. The one who could reshape the galaxy with a thought. The one who could tear the stars from the sky if he chose. Well, Sovereign, it seems the galaxy has a different plan for you now." Stephen's breath caught in his throat at the words, but he stood tall, unwilling to show weakness in the face of Cain's harsh words. "I'm no sovereign," Stephen said through clenched teeth, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "I don't know what I am anymore." Cain stepped forward, his eyes narrowing with intensity. "That's exactly the problem," he growled. "You've forgotten what you were, but the rest of us haven't. Your empire has laid waste to billions. You think the galaxy will bow to you again? They've already suffered enough. Your power, your strength, it was never meant to be wielded like a weapon. It was meant to create, not destroy." Stephen's heart hammered in his chest, the weight of Cain's words sinking in like a stone. For the first time, Stephen's mind was clear enough to realize the full extent of what had been done in his name. The atrocities. The deaths. The fear that had spread across the galaxy. He had been part of it. He had helped to shape it. Cain's voice softened, but the fire in his eyes never wavered. "You've been given a second chance, Stephen Riner. The choice is yours. Will you continue the cycle of destruction? Or will you fight for the freedom of those who've been crushed beneath the boot of the Empire?" Marcia watched Stephen closely, her eyes filled with both hope and fear. Hope that he would make the right decision, and fear that the darkness inside him was too strong to overcome. The archives were hidden deep within the heart of Haven, the walls of this ancient chamber steeped in the weight of secrets. The room hummed with an energy that was both unsettling and familiar, an energy that seemed to pulse with the hidden truths of the galaxy, long buried and forgotten. The air inside was thick, as though the very stone of the asteroid had absorbed the wisdom, the pain, and the bloodshed of countless revolutions. Shelves lined with data crystals and holobooks stretched into the shadows, their surfaces etched with symbols from 1,000 different cultures, each representing the hopes and dreams of those who had resisted the Empire's crushing grip. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, faint traces of glowing veins of light running through them like the lifeblood of a forgotten entity. A cool, steady hum echoed through the chamber, the flickering lights casting long shadows across the room. The atmosphere was both reverent and heavy, as if Stephen was entering a sanctuary of ancient knowledge, one that had been kept hidden for centuries. Marcia stood beside Stephen, her eyes scanning the shelves with a focused intensity. She moved with a quiet purpose, her movements measured but fluid, like someone accustomed to navigating ancient worlds. She stopped before one of the panels, and with a flick of her wrist, a holographic projection sprang to life before them. It shimmered in the air, casting a soft glow across their faces, its ethereal form taking shape like the remnants of a memory. The symbols it displayed seemed to shift, some familiar, some alien, dancing across the air in a choreography of forgotten truths. As the image solidified, Stephen's breath caught in his throat. What he saw was beyond comprehension, fragments of his own past, floating like whispers in the darkness, woven together by the words of an ancient prophecy. "The renegade lord," the prophecy began, the voice that spoke it echoing from the projection like a distant memory. "The one who was once a protector of the oppressed, the one who wielded the power to either bind the galaxy in chains or free it from the shackles of tyranny. The choice lies in his hands." Stephen's gaze locked onto the words as they flickered, growing clearer with each passing moment. Renegade. It was a name he had heard, felt, but never understood. It was as though it was meant for him, but it felt as if someone else had worn it first, someone who had taken up a mantle he did not remember. He felt his pulse quicken as the prophecy continued to unfold. He who is the last of the ancient lords, the last of the sovereigns, must decide. Will he rule the galaxy as his ancestors did, with the power of an empire forged through blood and fire? Or will he cast off the chains of his lineage and break the cycle of destruction? The words echoed in his mind, swirling around him like a storm. He wanted to look away, to close his eyes and deny it, but the truth settled in him like a stone in his gut. He had been bred for this. His very existence was wrapped in power and domination, a legacy that stretched beyond the stars. Yet, the renegade, the part of him that had once fought to protect the weak, the part that had slipped through the cracks of his forgotten self, was still there. And it was fighting for control. Marcia's voice cut through the haze of thoughts that clouded his mind. This prophecy, it isn't just a warning. It's a choice. Your choice. Her tone was steady, but there was an undercurrent of urgency there, a quiet plea. You have the power to decide. The galaxy does not need another empire. It does not need another tyrant. But it will need someone to lead them into the future. Someone who will break the chains. Stephen turned to face her, his thoughts spinning, his chest heavy. But the cube, he whispered, his voice cracking slightly. It's the source of my power. But is it? Marcia's expression grew solemn as she met his gaze, her emerald eyes filled with a sadness he had yet to understand. The cube is more than just a key to your power, Stephen, she said quietly, almost as though she were revealing a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. It is a control mechanism, a shackle that keeps you from your true self. It was created by beings from another dimension, beings who feared the power of the lords, feared that the ancient sovereigns would one day turn against them. They used the cube to keep you bound, to keep you from remembering who you truly are. Stephen's breath caught in his throat as her words took root in his mind. The cube had always been a part of him, an integral piece of his identity, his strength. But now, he understood. It had never been meant to empower him. It had been meant to control him. His power, his strength, had always been held captive by the very thing he thought would make him whole. He staggered backward, feeling the weight of the truth settle on his chest like a mountain. I thought I was meant to wield this power, he murmured, his voice filled with a raw disbelief. I thought I was the one who could change everything. But now, it was never mine to wield. Marcia took a step closer, her presence unwavering, as though she were the only anchor in the storm of Stephen's thoughts. The cube was never meant to empower you, Stephen. It was meant to keep you from your true potential. You are the renegade because you are meant to break free of this. You were never meant to rule the galaxy with fear. The words resonated deep within him, stirring something ancient, something he had buried for so long. Compassion. Humanity. These were the things that had once made him different from the other lords. The things he had forgotten. The power he had once wielded could be used to protect, not to destroy. He had always believed that his strength came from domination. But now, he was starting to see that true power came from breaking free, from choosing a new path. Marcia's voice was quiet but filled with an unshakable conviction. You must destroy the cube, Stephen. It will make you mortal. But it will also set you free. You will have the power to choose your future, to lead with honor, not with fear. The weight of her words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Destroying the cube would cost him his power, would make him human again. But perhaps that was the only way he could truly change the galaxy, by rejecting the cycle of tyranny and starting anew. The Galactic Council chamber aboard the Eternal Dominion was a grand, imposing space, a place where the fates of entire systems had once been decided with a wave of a hand. The floor was made of gleaming black stone, dark and polished to perfection, reflecting the towering pillars that stretched up to the high, arched ceiling. Above, the roof seemed to ripple with energy, casting faint, shifting patterns across the chamber like shadows that danced and merged in time with the pulsing hum of the ship's core. The air felt thick with authority, an unspoken weight of power that pressed down from every angle. At the far end of the chamber stood a massive circular dais, where the council members sat, their figures outlined in the soft glow of their holographic displays. 12 beings, each representing different corners of the galaxy, their faces shadowed beneath elaborate headdresses and masks. The room was filled with a solemn energy, a feeling of finality, as if the decision being made here would decide the future of the entire galaxy. Stephen stood in the center of the room, his feet planted firmly on the cold stone, the glow from the cube beneath his skin casting an eerie light on his face. His breath was steady, though his heart raced. His eyes, now golden with the power surging through him, locked onto the figures before him. He could feel their gazes upon him, like an invisible weight pressing down on his shoulders. They had summoned him here, expecting him to take his rightful place as the ruler of the galaxy. Sovereign. Anita KX stood beside him, her uniform pristine, but her face was twisted with inner conflict. She, too, could feel the gravity of the moment. Once a steadfast supporter of the Empire, she now found herself torn between her loyalty to the old order and the powerful, unsettling truth that Stephen embodied. "The galaxy needs you, Stephen," she said, her voice low, but filled with urgency. "The rebellion is dangerous. The systems are fracturing. You can restore the Empire, bring order, and end the chaos. You've seen it, your power is undeniable. The galaxy needs a ruler like you, one who can unite the stars once again." Stephen turned to her, his expression unreadable, the tension between them palpable. He could feel her hesitation, her fear that perhaps what she had fought for all these years was crumbling before her eyes. She had always believed in the power of the Empire, in the stability it provided, despite its iron grip. But Stephen, changed, awakened, was no longer the man she had once known. The power coursing through him felt alien, foreign even. It consumed him at times, calling to him to embrace it fully, to accept his place as a ruler among the stars. But was that really who he was? "I was never meant to rule," Stephen whispered, his voice filled with quiet intensity. "Not like this." But before he could say more, a voice rang out from the council. The leader, an elder with translucent skin, his features hollowed by age and wisdom, raised his hand to silence the room. "You are the sovereign, the last of the lords. You will command the fleets, restore what has been lost, and bring the galaxy to heal. You have been gifted the master key, Stephen. It is time to reclaim your godhood." A holographic key materialized in the center of the room, glowing with an ominous blue light. The master key, an object of immense power, the key to fully synchronize with the cube embedded in Stephen's chest. It would amplify his abilities, unlocking the full potential of the Lord's power and binding him to his legacy. The council's voices merged into one, chanting, urging Stephen to take the key, to embrace his birthright, to become the ruler he had been destined to be. The room seemed to close in, the pressure from all sides mounting as they awaited his decision. The future of the galaxy, its fate rested in his hands. Stephen's heart thundered in his chest as the key hovered before him, its power palpable. His mind flashed to the destruction he had once caused, the countless lives lost in the wake of his empire. He felt the pull of the key, the invitation to become something more, something godlike. But at what cost? Anita stood beside him, her hand lightly resting on his arm, her voice a quiet plea. "Please, Stephen. You must take it. We can rebuild the empire. We can make it right." But Marcia, who had been standing off to the side, watching with a quiet, steady gaze, finally stepped forward, her voice cutting through the din. "No, Stephen." Her tone was firm, resolute, even as the council's eyes shot to her in disbelief. "This isn't the answer. This isn't who you are." The tension in the chamber was palpable, the room silent except for the soft hum of the master key, floating like a dark promise before them all. The galaxy doesn't need another tyrant, Marcia continued, her voice unwavering, though her eyes softened as they met Stephen's. You're not meant to be a god, Stephen. You're meant to be something more. Something human. Stephen's eyes flicked between Marcia, Anita, and the council. The choice lay before him. It was the moment he had feared, the moment he had known would come. He stepped forward, his body moving almost of its own accord. The cube beneath his skin pulsed with energy, a low, thrumming beat that seemed to speak to him, calling him to embrace it, to take the master key and reclaim his godhood. But as his hand reached out toward it, a single thought broke through the storm in his mind. What would it mean to destroy it? He could feel the weight of the choice in his chest. The power he had always known, the control he could wield, was nothing compared to what he would become if he rejected it. The key was only a tool of manipulation, a piece of the ancient tyranny that had bound him for so long. With a sudden surge of energy, Stephen pulled back his hand, his fist clenched, and in that single moment, he made his choice. His eyes locked with the council, his gaze steady, unwavering. I reject this. He reached down, his hand closing over the cube embedded in his chest. With a single, powerful motion, he ripped it from his body, the energy inside him flaring in a blinding burst of light. The pain was unbearable, a searing agony that made him gasp for breath, but as the cube shattered in his hand, the light exploded outward, filling the chamber with an ethereal glow. The sound of the explosion rang in his ears, deafening, but in the midst of the chaos, he felt light truly alive. The power that had once defined him, the power that had threatened to consume him, was gone. The darkness that had haunted him for so long had been destroyed. The master key fell to the floor, its glow dimming, and the room fell silent. The council stood in stunned silence, their faces marked with disbelief and rage, but Stephen's mind was clear. The chains had been broken. He was free. For the first time, he felt like himself again. The stars outside the viewport seemed to stretch farther than Stephen had ever noticed before, their light shimmering like diamonds scattered across the dark velvet of space. The vastness of it all, a cold, infinite sea of stars, felt strangely welcoming, as if the galaxy itself had opened its arms to him. The vastness was no longer a reminder of his insignificance, it was a canvas, untouched, ready for something new. The light from the destroyed cube had spread across the galaxy like a pulse, an invisible wave rippling outward from the eternal dominion. It was a wave of freedom, sweeping through the fabric of the empire, cracking the foundations of tyranny and leaving in its wake a strange, serene silence. No more chains. No more control. For the first time, the galaxy felt alive with possibilities raw and untamed, waiting to be shaped by those who had been forgotten. The eternal dominion, once the symbol of an empire that had stretched its iron fingers across the stars, now seemed small against the backdrop of space, its once glorious hull now a reminder of something broken, something that had been shattered. Stephen stood at the viewport, his hands resting lightly on the cool glass, gazing out at the stars. He had taken the power from the cube and destroyed it, freed himself from the ancient chains that had bound him. But the act had done more than free him. It had sent out a ripple, a pulse of energy that was shifting the very foundation of the galaxy itself. The former empire was crumbling, its hold on the galaxy slipping like sand through an open hand. Systems that had once lived in fear were beginning to stir, taking their first steps toward autonomy and freedom. Beside Stephen stood Marcia, her violet skin glowing faintly under the soft light of the stars, her eyes brimming with hope. She had been his guide, his ally, standing steadfast in the face of the storm. Now, she was more than that. She was a companion in a new era, one that would rise from the ashes of the old world. Anita stood on the other side, her usual composure now tempered with a deep understanding. The weight of her loyalty to the Empire had been shattered, and though it was clear she still bore the scars of her past, she stood with them no longer as an enforcer of the old ways, but as a new ally in the formation of something different. Something equal. The trio stood together, staring out into the galaxy that had always been out of reach, now ripe with possibilities. They were free, bound by nothing but their own choices and the bonds they had forged together. Stephen felt something shift within him, a warmth that spread through his chest, radiating outward. It wasn't the godlike power he had once wielded, nor the sense of domination that had once filled him. It was something far more profound: humanity. A simple, pure connection to the universe around him, to those he had come to care for, and, most of all, to himself. What now? Marcia's voice broke the silence, her words light but filled with significance. She had been the one to help him see the truth, to help him embrace the choice to become something new. But now, she asked him the question that still hung in the air. Stephen turned to her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He could see the unease in her eyes, the uncertainty of what lay ahead, but it didn't matter anymore. The galaxy would not be shaped by fear, but by those who dared to choose something different. Now, he murmured, his voice steady, full of purpose. Now, we build something better. Together. Behind them, the council chamber was empty. The darkened halls of the Empire stood still, waiting to be reclaimed, reimagined. The rebellion had sparked something much larger than a simple fight for power. It had sparked the beginning of a new world, one where equality and respect would take the place of domination and fear. A world where freedom was not just a dream, but a reality. Anita stepped forward, her voice now quieter, but more resolute. The galaxy will need a new structure. New leaders, new systems of governance. The council, she paused, glancing back at the silent, empty chamber, they will have to be replaced. And it won't be easy. It will take time, effort. But it's worth it, Marcia interrupted, her voice full of conviction. The galaxy is waking up. And it's going to be free. Stephen nodded, his gaze returning to the stars. There were so many worlds out there, so many voices that had been silenced, so many people waiting for their turn to choose their own path. But now, for the first time, those paths were open. He could see them now, in the distance, new worlds, new hope, all waiting to be shaped by the hands of those who dared to rise above the old order. A sudden gust of wind swept through the chamber, the doors opening wide, bringing the cold breath of space inside. The faintest whispers of distant stars seemed to call to them, pulling them forward. It was as if the universe itself was inviting them in, ready to be explored, ready to be reclaimed by those who would fight for it. Stephen took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, his chest rising with a sense of clarity he had never known before. The galaxy was his to shape, not as a god, not as a ruler, but as a human, alive, free, and determined. We'll make sure they have the chance to choose, just like we did, Stephen said quietly, more to himself than to the others. Marcia's smile widened, and Anita's expression softened, a faint glimmer of something new, a flicker of hope shining in her eyes. They turned together, the doors of the Eternal Dominion sliding open to the vast, starry expanse of space beyond. The journey was far from over. But as they walked forward, they knew they were no longer bound by the chains of their past. Their future was waiting for them. The view from the viewport was breathtaking. The endless void of space stretched out before Stephen, its cold beauty both humbling and awe-inspiring. The stars, distant and bright, flickered like tiny beacons, their light reaching across the dark expanse in a delicate dance that had no beginning and no end. This was the universe, raw and untamed, alive with infinite possibilities. It was a canvas waiting to be painted by those who dared to shape it. Behind him, the ship, once a symbol of tyranny and control, now felt almost insignificant in the face of the vastness of space. The Eternal Dominion, a colossal ship built to dominate, was now drifting aimlessly, no longer a tool of oppression, but a broken relic of a bygone era. The pulse from the destruction of the cube had spread across the galaxy, a wave of freedom that reverberated through the fabric of the universe, breaking the chains that had bound countless lives for centuries. It was as if the galaxy itself had exhaled a collective breath, the weight of millennia of tyranny lifted in a single, defining moment. The Empire had begun to crumble, its foundation shattering as the systems it had controlled began to awaken, shaking off the fear that had kept them under its heel for so long. Stephen's hand rested lightly on the cool glass of the viewport. He could still feel the echoes of the cube's power deep within him, but it was fading now, replaced by a new sense of clarity. He was no longer the sovereign, the god the galaxy had expected him to be. He was human, free from the control that had defined him for so long. For the first time, he felt alive, truly alive, as if the weight of his past had finally been lifted. Beside him, Marcia stood tall, her violet skin glowing faintly under the soft light of the stars. She had been his guide through the darkness, showing him the path to freedom. Her eyes, always so focused, now held a softness, a glimmer of hope that had not been there before. She had been right together, they had broken the cycle of destruction and oppression. Together, they had set the galaxy on a new path. Anita, standing slightly to the side, was a more complex figure. Once a staunch supporter of the Empire, she had now chosen to stand with Stephen and Marcia. Her eyes, too, were filled with something new, uncertainty, perhaps, but also understanding. She had seen the truth that had eluded her for so long, and now, she was ready to help build a new order, one based not on control, but on mutual respect and equality. The Empire had fallen. But in its place, a new federation was beginning to form, a federation that would no longer be governed by the iron fist of a single ruler, but by the voices of the free peoples of the galaxy. The foundation of this new era was built on something different, a shared vision, a collective effort to create a galaxy where each species, each individual, had the freedom to choose their own destiny. The air around them felt lighter now, filled with the soft hum of a galaxy beginning to rebuild. It was a sound of hope, of a future that was no longer bound by the chains of the past. The quiet murmur of distant conversations echoed through the halls of the Eternal Dominion, now becoming a symbol of a new beginning, not of dominance, but of collaboration. Stephen turned to face Marcia and Anita, his eyes meeting theirs with a quiet understanding. The weight of the decision had passed, but the journey was far from over. The galaxy was still fractured, still in need of healing. But now, they had the freedom to shape it however they saw fit. The road ahead won't be easy, Stephen said softly, his voice full of both resolve and optimism. But it's ours to walk together. Marcia nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. It will take time, but this is the beginning of something better. Anita, too, seemed to find peace in the quiet of the moment. The Empire may be gone, but there is still much to be done. We must rebuild. Not just the systems, but the trust of the people. Stephen glanced out into the stars once more, his heart filled with a strange peace. He had been lost, caught in a cycle of control, domination, and fear. But now, he understood. True power didn't come from the ability to command, to control. It came from the ability to connect, to lead with compassion and understanding, to respect the autonomy of others. The cube had been his shackle. But its destruction had been his liberation, a liberation that had spread like a wave across the galaxy, setting free all those who had been held under the Empire's oppressive rule. For the first time, Stephen felt like he had finally stepped into his true self. No longer a god, but human. And in that humanity, he felt a deeper power than he had ever known. Together, with Marcia and Anita at his side, he knew the journey ahead was uncertain. There would be struggles, challenges, and obstacles to overcome. But for the first time, it felt like a journey of hope, not of fear. A journey of possibilities, not of fate. And as they stood together, watching the stars twinkle above them, Stephen knew their journey had just begun, and with it, the hope of a galaxy reborn. Thank you for joining us on this journey through The Last Sovereign, A Warrior's Redemption. Every character and every challenge brings forth deep lessons about courage, redemption, and sacrifice. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss out on upcoming videos filled with drama and thought-provoking tales. We'll continue to take you on unexpected journeys where every decision could change the course of fate. Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below, because the story never truly ends, it continues within all of us. Thank you for being part of this community. See you in the next video. This should help leave a lasting impression on your viewers and encourage them to return for more content. Let me know if you need any adjustments or additional ideas.